The rain is coming down in sheets, a cold, relentless curtain turning the cobblestones of the city square into a black mirror. It reflects the streetlights, the frantic energy of the crowd, the impassive face of the bronze god towering above. You have 60 seconds. 60 seconds to topple a dictator. To rewrite a century. The rope is slick in your hands, a coarse, living thing biting into your raw skin. Below, the crowd is a churning sea of faces, 1,000 different stories converging on this one, impossible point. You see the elation, the terror, the pure, unadulterated rage. You hear the sirens, a rising, metallic scream that feels like it's coming from inside your own skull. They're close. The police cordon, which had been a flimsy, symbolic barrier, is about to collapse into a wall of shields and batons. Your friends are shouting your name, their voices cracking with adrenaline and fear. They're looking at you. You're the one at the winch. Your hand hovers over the lever, trembling. Is this courage or madness? The winch groans, a deep, guttural sound of protest as it takes the strain. The ropes go taut, shedding water like tears. They sing with tension. And for a split second, a single, heart-stopping beat, the massive statue seems to lean, to hesitate, caught between 100 years of manufactured glory and this one, desperate minute of defiance. The bronze torso slants away from its plinth, mortar flakes bursting from the base like snow. The sirens are deafening now, not just a sound but a physical pressure. The clock is ticking in your head, each second a hammer blow against your ribs. What do you do? Pull the lever and become a hero or a criminal? Hesitate, and let this moment, this one chance to break the spell, slip away forever? This isn't a hypothetical. This is the decisive minute. The instant a piece of public property, an object of civic veneration, becomes a piece of contested evidence in the court of history. And in this single minute, entire national mythologies are unwritten and rewritten. Because every autopsy begins with a body. And tonight, our body is a fallen giant of fractured bronze, lying broken on the wet stones. I want you to come closer. Ignore the chaos for a moment and just look. Put on your forensic gloves. See this hand? It's massive, larger than life, still clamped around a bronze baton, frozen mid-command even in its disgrace. This inert metal tells a story that no history book can capture. Let's start with the alloy. Our lab analysis shows a specific mix of copper, tin, and a whisper of lead. This isn't just random trivia. This metallurgical signature points us to a state-sponsored foundry from the 1920s, a specific batch recorded in a dusty ledger we found in the state archives. It tells us this statue wasn't a gift from a grateful public, it was a calculated act of statecraft, forged in the same foundries that made the nation's cannons. Now, look at the shear points on the massive bolts that once held it to its pedestal. They're not clean. The edges are jagged, torn. They're the ballistic fingerprints of a cheap, industrial-grade bolt cutter, probably bought from a hardware store just a few blocks from here. That tells us this wasn't a professional, state-sanctioned removal. This was grassroots. This was messy. This was real. This was a rebellion, not a renovation. And the players, oh, the players in this grand, terrible opera are always there if you know where to look. They are the living evidence. There's Yuri, the university student, his face a mask of righteous fury under a fringe of wet hair. His sleeves are caked in mud, his knuckles are bleeding. He claims he threw the first rope, a claim a dozen others will make by morning. His motive is pure, to erase the symbol of the men who sent his grandfather to a gulag. Over there, leaning against a graffiti-covered wall, is a veteran, his fingers unconsciously tracing the medals on his chest. His face is a storm of conflict. Is this an act of liberation or the desecration of an order he once fought and bled for? What does his sacrifice mean if its symbols are torn down in the rain? There's a priest, his black cassock soaked through, wiping rain from his brow as he murmurs a prayer. Is he praying for the souls of the oppressors, or for the future of the liberated? And see that man with the grease-black hand standing impassively by the winch? He's no protester. He's a contractor named Mikhail. He's not thinking about history or justice. He's thinking about salvage value. He's doing mental math. 10 tons of high-grade bronze, at the current market rate, will fetch a price that could change his family's life. He's here for the fallout, the material profit of a nation's symbolic collapse. Every single person in this square, the activist, the veteran, the priest, the opportunist, the riot cop gripping his baton, has a stake in this game. Land, legal title, who gets celebrated in the new history books, and whose name is violently erased. It all comes down to this one, violent, rain-slicked minute. But I need you to understand, this isn't just chaos. This is a science. A kind of urban forensics that allows us to read the story of a revolution from its physical remains. Look at the rope fibers still clinging to the bronze neck. Microscopic analysis reveals they are jute, a natural fiber common in agricultural use. This tells us the ropes were likely sourced from a rural sympathizer, not a modern climbing supply shop. That single fiber connects this urban uprising to a deeper, countryside discontent. The winch teeth. They leave a mechanical signature, a pattern of scrapes in the metal. That serial number, when we run it, leads us to a rental yard at the edge of the city, and a rental agreement signed under a false name just 2 days ago. The planning was meticulous. And that smear of white paint across the carved dates on the pedestal? Our lab confirms the pigment is lead white under a thin lacquer, a type of industrial paint phased out 10 years ago. It matches a batch used to paint the city's municipal buses. A disgruntled city worker? A sympathetic insider? It's another thread in the conspiracy. We're not just looking at a fallen statue, we're looking at a crime scene. And by dusting for these invisible fingerprints, a municipal removal order left unsigned in a drawer, a clipped and frantic police radio transmission we acquired from a source, a donor list hidden in a colonial-era roadworks ledger, we can reconstruct the anatomy of a revolution. We can pinpoint the exact moment a symbol's power was deliberately and violently switched off. It's a murder investigation where the victim is an idea. To understand how this works, to see the pattern that connects these moments of rupture across time and space, we need to open 3 of our most critical case files. 3 iconic topples that acted as seismic shocks to the world order, whose aftershocks are still being felt today. Our exhibits are laid out on the table: Moscow, August 22, 1991. Baghdad, April 9, 2003. And Charlottesville, Virginia, in the long, hot summer of 2017 and the surgical removals that followed. Each one looks completely different on the surface. A chaotic popular uprising, a foreign military invasion, a bitter domestic culture war. But when you analyze the evidence, when you trace the logistics and the money and the motives, the blueprint for rewriting history becomes terrifyingly, undeniably clear. Case File 1, Moscow, 1991. Our patient is Felix Dzerzhinsky, a name that still sends a chill down the spine of millions. Iron Felix, the founder of the Soviet secret police, the Chayka, which would later become the KGB. His 15-ton iron statue stood defiantly outside the KGB's infamous headquarters at Lubyanka Square, a place synonymous with midnight arrests, brutal interrogations, and executions. It wasn't just a statue, it was a tombstone and a threat, a constant reminder of the state's absolute power. The context for its fall? Absolute, terrifying pandemonium. Mikhail Gorbachev, the architect of glasnost and perestroika, is under house arrest at his dacha in Crimea. A cabal of hardline communist officials, the Gang of 8, has seized control in a desperate attempt to turn back the clock and restore the old Soviet order. For 3 days, the city of Moscow, and the world, has held its breath. Tanks are in the streets, but the soldiers are young, confused, some even smiling and accepting flowers from babushkas. Authority hasn't just been challenged, it has evaporated into a fog of rumor and uncertainty. Into this vacuum steps the crowd. Tens of thousands of Muscovites pour into the streets, defying the coup, building barricades, surrounding the Russian White House to protect Boris Yeltsin. By August 22, the coup is visibly collapsing. And the crowd, now feeling its power, turns its attention to Lubyanka Square. They aren't just protesters anymore, they are the de facto government of the square. They bring in a construction crane, commandeered from a nearby site. A fierce debate breaks out. Should they pull it down? Or just spray paint "executioner" across its chest? Some argue that to destroy it is to repeat the sins of the Bolsheviks, erasing history. Others scream that to leave it standing is an insult to every victim of the regime. The decision is made. The cables are attached. The crowd holds its breath. And when that iron statue is finally lifted from its plinth, swinging grotesquely in the air, it's not just an act of vandalism. It's a declaration. A visual confirmation that the coup has failed. That the entire Soviet script, an ideology that dominated half the world for 70 years, has been rendered null and void in a single, cathartic moment. The fall didn't cause the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was the official, televised announcement that the collapse had already happened. The state was so paralyzed, its authority so fractured, it couldn't even protect the icon of its own secret police. That's a critical clue for our investigation. A toppling succeeds when state legitimacy fractures from the inside, when the men with guns no longer know who they're supposed to be pointing them at. But what happens when the fall isn't a symptom of internal collapse, but a carefully scripted scene in a much larger, external invasion? What happens when the cameras are not just present, but are the primary audience for the event? That brings us to Case File 2, Baghdad, 2003. The statue is of Saddam Hussein in Firdos Square, a relatively minor monument in the grand scheme of Baghdad's iconography, but one located directly opposite the Palestine Hotel, where the world's media had been quartered. The scene is iconic, beamed live into billions of homes worldwide. A U.S. Marine from the 3rd Infantry Division climbs the plinth and places an American flag over the statue's head. There's a brief, awkward moment, the optics are all wrong. The flag is quickly replaced with a pre-invasion Iraqi one. Then, an M88 recovery vehicle, a 70-ton armored behemoth designed to tow tanks, attaches a chain to the statue's neck. With a lurch, the hollow bronze figure is brought crashing down. The crowd, a mix of genuinely jubilant Iraqis and curious onlookers, rushes forward, beating the fallen head with their shoes, the ultimate insult in Iraqi culture. On the surface, it's a perfect image of liberation. The grateful masses welcoming their saviors. A made-for-TV moment signaling the end of a brutal dictatorship. But let's look at the forensics. Let's read the scene like detectives. The square was not full of thousands of celebrating Iraqis, as the tight camera angle suggested. It was a relatively small crowd, in a square that had been secured by us Marines just moments before. The entire event was, in many ways, a carefully managed piece of military psychological operations, or PSYOP. It was designed to send a simple, unambiguous message to any remaining Ba'athist loyalists: the regime is over, the fight is done. But unlike in Moscow, where the toppling confirmed a political reality that had emerged from the people themselves, in Baghdad, it created a dangerous illusion. It suggested that defeating the symbol was the same as building a new state. The spectacle of the fall, so powerful on television, masked a terrifying reality on the ground: the complete dissolution of the Iraqi state, the looting of its ministries, the unleashing of sectarian furies that had been suppressed for decades. The toppling in Firdos Square didn't build a new Iraq. It revealed a power vacuum that years of brutal insurgency and civil war would rush to fill. The lesson here is critically different. A toppling orchestrated by an outside force can be a powerful piece of propaganda, but it cannot, by itself, transfer legitimacy. It can create a void, but it cannot build a nation. It was a symbolic victory that paved the way for a strategic defeat. So we've seen a fall caused by spontaneous state collapse, and a fall designed to broadcast a collapse. But our third case file is different. It's a slow-motion toppling, a grinding war of attrition, fought not with cranes and crowds in a single afternoon, but with lawyers, city councils, and secret contracts over the course of years. Case File 3, Charlottesville, Virginia, and the War over America's Confederate Monuments. Here, the statues of Confederate Generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson were not symbols of a recently defeated regime. They were symbols of a much older, deeply embedded narrative, the lost cause of the Confederacy. Erected in the 1920s, during the height of the Jim Crow era, they were designed to assert a vision of white supremacy. They were part of the civic infrastructure, woven into the very identity of the city. The fight to remove them wasn't a spontaneous uprising, it was a grueling, bitter legal and political war. On one side, activists, students, and historians arguing these were not mere memorials, but active monuments to a legacy of slavery and racial terror. On the other, groups arguing they were memorials to history and heritage, protected by state law. The conflict simmered for years in tense city council meetings, in lawsuits and counter-lawsuits, before exploding into the violent, fatal, Unite the Right rally in 2017. The statues became lightning rods, magnets for a national conflict over identity, history, and belonging. When they were finally removed, it wasn't by a cheering crowd in the light of day. It was done in the dead of night on July 10, 2021. A masked, private crew arrived before dawn, under heavy police guard, in a pre-dawn surgical operation. The forensics here aren't rope fibers and tool marks, they are paper trails. Municipal permits, court injunctions, private funding sourced to pay for the multi-million-dollar removal, insurance waivers for the contractors. This toppling shows us a third, distinct pattern. In a stable, functioning, but deeply divided democracy, the battle over monuments is a proxy war for control of the national narrative. And the removal, when it finally comes, is often a top-down, legally sanitized affair designed specifically to prevent the explosive, cathartic moment we saw in Moscow. So let's step back into our war room. Let's pin the evidence from our three cases to the board. Moscow, a chaotic, bottom-up declaration of state failure. Baghdad, a top-down, televised spectacle of invasion. Charlottesville, a slow, bitter, legally negotiated proxy war. They look completely different. But the blueprint, the DNA of symbolic transformation, is exactly the same. Let's connect the dots. 1. Statues are never just statues. They are batteries, charged with decades of state-sponsored legitimacy. A crisis doesn't invent new grievances, it just creates a moment where the crowd can drain the battery and reassign that legitimacy to themselves, in real time. 2. The toppling is never truly spontaneous. Look closer and you will always find the logistics. The organizers who circulated the pamphlets. The funders who paid for the ropes. The political faction that already had the crane on standby. The legal team that found the loophole in the heritage law. The crowd is the energy, but behind the energy is almost always a plan. The crowd converts latent capacity into a historic event. 3. The deciding factor, the fulcrum on which history pivots, is always the wavering of authority. A police chief who quietly tells his men to stand down and observe. A mayor who signs a quiet removal permit at 2 a.m. A military that's too confused, too demoralized, or too complicit to intervene. The moment the state hesitates, the moment it loses its nerve, the bronze is as good as gone. 4. Follow the money. The salvage value, the raw material cost of the monument, shapes the aftermath in ways we rarely discuss. Who profits from the scrap metal becomes a cynical footnote in the news story. In the chaos of a collapsing state, that bronze can fund an insurgency, a political party, or just a gangster's retirement. And finally, point 5, the memory entrepreneurs. This is the crucial, final stage. As soon as the statue hits the ground, the curators, the activists, the historians, and the politicians swoop in to claim the body. They are the ones who negotiate its fate. They are the ones who decide if the rubble becomes a sacred relic in a museum archive, carefully preserved and recontextualized, or if it gets melted down, forgotten, and erased from the record entirely. This battle for the corpse is the battle for the final draft of history. The turning point is always a tiny, almost invisible detail. A single bolt that snaps unexpectedly. A withheld patrol order that leaves a square undefended for a critical 10 minutes. A single photograph, a single video clip, that goes viral and permanently reassigns the meaning of the event for a global audience. In Moscow, the failed coup turned a toppled statue into the death certificate of the USSR. Billions of lives were rerouted by the meaning that was made in that 1 minute. And the costs are tallied immediately: arrests, injuries, ruined reputations, museums with sudden, massive, and unfunded storage bills, and lawsuits that will outlive everyone who was in the square that night. This pattern isn't just history. It's a predictive model. If you want to know where the next political earthquake will strike, don't look at the polls or listen to the pundits. Look at the public squares. Find the monuments that are contested. Where authority is brittle, where a black market for salvage metal exists, and where networks of organizers are already in place, the monuments are the canaries in the coal mine. They will be the first theater of a new political order. Toppling a statue isn't just breaking a thing. It's a practical seizure of a nation's narrative infrastructure. That single fall will trigger a cascade of consequences you can't even imagine. School curricula will be rewritten. Streets and squares will be renamed. City planners will draft new, complex bylaws. And our smartphones? They turn the wreckage into an instantaneous, global court of public opinion. A single viral clip can harden an event into permanent memory and, eventually, into national policy. This matters, right now, at this very moment, because this forensic blueprint is being executed somewhere in the world as we speak. It is happening in your country, in your city, maybe even in your neighborhood. The choices we make about these public symbols, these bronze and stone avatars of our collective memory, determine who feels safe, who feels seen, who feels a sense of belonging, and who is told, day after day, in the most public way imaginable, that they do not belong. The built environment is a constant, silent broadcast of who holds power and whose story is worth telling. The fall of a statue is a strategic event, an act of contested sovereignty that physically remaps that power. Our verdict, after examining all the evidence, is this: whoever controls public memory controls the map of permissible futures. You can see this blueprint running underneath our borders, our economies, and our technologies. Here at Archives of Humanity, we don't just read history. We run the forensics. We get our hands dirty. We drop deep dive investigations like this every single day. If you believe that history is something you do, not just something you read, then hit subscribe and join the war room. Now, I'm turning the camera, and the investigation, over to you. Look around your own town, your own city. There's a statue out there. You know the one. The one that someone loves, and someone else despises. If you were given the crane, the crew, and the legal cover for one night, no consequences, which one falls? And more importantly, who do you appoint to tell the story of the empty pedestal left behind? What do you want them to say? Get specific. Let me know in the comments.